And yet we're sitting here obsessing over one word in a long paragraph that said poison the blood when it included a reference to mental health institutions and jails and other public resources in the United States. That is everything that's wrong with our media right now.
When you
and I think that it's going to be people like you guys who are actually going to help lead the media out of this, because you are actually not beholden by the same partisan orthodoxies.
When you got a guy who
talk about the actual substance, about what we need to address.
It's hard to when you got a guy who says he wants to be a dictator for a day. It's hard when it's a guy who says it's hard when it's a guy who says you got to terminate the Constitution in order to overturn the results of an election. It's hard when it's a guy who's led an attempted coup in this country. No.
The derangement syndrome and focus on the actual problems we have to solve as a country.
All right, guys. So we have to do another video that is a part of a series of videos that I am dubbing Charlamagne getting schooled by people much smarter than him. In fact, I actually make a playlist. Okay, and the first video in the playlist should be Joe Biden telling Charlamagne the God, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Okay, Charlamagne will always be known as the guy that allowed a liberal white man to tell him that he's not black if he doesn't vote for Democrats. Okay, but what we have here is Dumb and Dumber, Charlamagne the God, DJ Envy. Now, Teslin Figaro, the woke black lady that usually is on the show, she's the dumbest. Dumbest is not here. Okay, so we have Dumb and Dumber getting schooled by Vivek Ramaswamy on a bunch of issues across the board. Now, yesterday I did a reaction video to Vivek schooling Charlamagne on the founders and slavery. Okay, the fact that the founders owned slaves, and Charlamagne the God with his peanut brain. The only thing that he can extrapolate from that is that, well, the founders were racist and therefore the country's racist, etc., etc., etc. And Vivek gives a more thorough explanation of the founders and the founding of this country and the ideals and principles that guided them, even though they were slave owners, but how those ideals and principles set forth the foundation for a country to abolish slavery. But this type of nuance and discussion goes over Charlamagne the God's head because all he knows is woke liberal media talking points. He doesn't actually really know that much about the history of the country, the founding of the country, or any of the things that they're having a conversation about, discussions that he has on a daily basis. So therefore, again, he defaults to just, well, founders was racist, therefore the country is racist, etc., 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 right? And this same sort of logic is the kind of logic that Charlamagne the God uses when it comes to Trump, okay? And this is why he is extremely Trump deranged, because all he knows is what the liberal media says about Trump. He doesn't actually really know what Trump says or the full context of the things that Trump is saying, okay? And this is an important conversation because Charlamagne the God, in my opinion, represents the confused Negro, right? The confused Negro who can see the corruption of the Democrat Party. He obviously sees that there's a lot of hypocrisy, that these people aren't really who they claim they are, but he's stuck perpetually voting for Democrats because he doesn't do his own research to come to his own conclusions about the things that Trump is saying or the views of the other side of the aisle, okay? So with that being said, Vivek is going to check Charlamagne the God on his Trump derangement syndrome. And you're going to see his Trump derangement syndrome here in this interview. And this is going to go basically the same way that it went when Piers Morgan came on the show and checked Charlamagne the God on his Trump derangement syndrome. And Piers Morgan is not even a fan of Trump, right? But even Piers Morgan was like, yo, like, you got to admit, there's a lot of hypocrisy here when it comes to the things that Democrats complain about, particularly when we talk about immigration, and then what they complain about when it comes to Trump, right? So with that being said, I want to go ahead and react to this interview because, again, it's super fascinating. And I think Charlamagne the God does represent a lot of confused people in this country. So I think these conversations are important. So let's go ahead and get into it.
And so I think part of what's happened in this country is our partisan goggles have gotten so far in the way of us actually just having a conversation amongst citizens without the black label or the white label or the red label or the blue label, and just say, actually, let's have a conversation among citizens where there's almost a certain guilt, right? Like if you're among your liberal friends in New York City and you're saying something that Donald Trump said, but you're also saying the same thing about the border or whatever, you have to be guilty and flog yourself for saying it. Just forget about the guilt and just locate what are our actual principles. And I think I come back to two basic ones that unite us as Americans. The people we elect to run the government should run the government, not the bureaucracy. Those elected leaders owe a moral duty to the citizens of this country, not the citizens of Ukraine or another one. And oh, by the way, we all get to express and speak our minds freely and in the open. Whether or not we disagree, you get to speak your mind, and you do, and I do too, as long as each of us gets the same right in return. think those are basic rules of the road that most of us, 90% of us in this country, agree on. And
now, Trump doesn't agree with that, though.
Again, you see the Trump derangement here, right? So Vivek is talking about principles and things that we can do to unite as a country, right? Regardless of partisanship, okay? Understanding what we all agree on, regardless of who agrees with it or who disagrees with it, okay? Because what happens is that everything is seen through the lenses of race or the lenses of, oh, well, Trump supports that, so therefore I can't support it, even though, again, Democrats, they used to be, or at least they used to talk tough on immigration, right? You had Obama talking about building a moat and putting alligators in it to stop illegals from coming across the border, but they're trying to act like Trump was the worst thing ever when it comes to, illegal immigrants and his rhetoric against illegal immigrants. When, their guy, Obama, built the cages. So what Vivek is trying to say here is that, look, we all agree on a lot of stuff, but the problem is we can't really have a real discussion and conversation about it because we keep trying to paint each other as racist or bigots, okay, based off partisanship, right? Or whether or not Trump agrees or disagrees with it. And it's very silly how our politics has not become about policy and substance. It's become about bigotry and Trump. Right. And I think that's the point that he's really trying to make here. But again, Charlamagne the God, because he's Trump deranged, his takeaway from that is to talk about and to bring up Trump. Well, Trump bad, right? Which is exactly the point that Vivek is trying to make here. OK, you can't have a conversation about anything in this country without looking at it through these very partisan lenses.
Trump already said he wants to shut the media down for speaking about him if he becomes president again.
I think that here's what I've noticed happening in the country. I've had a front row seat to the media, okay, for the last year. Believe me, 12 of them follow me around everywhere I've gone for a long time. We do interviews at the end of every day, and I've granted more, media access or press access than anybody else for full transparency. Actually, we become friends with some of them, young people, actually. Not the people who are their bosses up the chain. I think a lot of them have lost their way, but the young people, 22 years old, who have, earnestly got a job, think they're actually doing a good job. Several of them actually I became personally quite friendly with, and I expect to remain friends with over the course of life. And the best ones I think aren't going to end up even staying in media. Are you about to making
excuses to why Trump wants to shut the media?
No, I'm going to tell you something else. Is what I've seen happen is, because I get questions on this regularly. Trump will say something. There will be one word they pick out. Vermin was the one. They followed me around about that for a week. What do you think about the Donald Trump called his opponents vermin? And it's a whole game that the media plays where they will
quoting Hitler.
They will pick one word he says and then actually have you respond to it, as opposed to taking
actually quoting Hitler.
But the obsession over picking some word that Donald Trump said,
he was quoting
and
Hitler.
Making that the news story versus actually asking about the substance. Right? I mean, Charlamagne, I think I saw some of your own commentary recently where you agree with me on the border being a crisis. And it's ridiculous what's happening on the southern border.
What that got to do with anything?
Well, the problem, Charlamagne, again, this is why I say this guy got a peanut brain. I don't understand how this guy has so much political clout, okay? Oh my God, he's such a simpleton, okay? The point that Vivek is trying to make is that if you listen to the context of what Trump is saying, the actual substance of what he's saying is that, hey, we have a problem at the border. We're letting people into this country that aren't necessarily good people, okay? You have criminals, drug cartels, smugglers, drugs coming into the country. Things that Charlamagne the God, in any other context, again, he agrees with, right? He says, look, the border is a problem. Okay, he said this. But yet his Trump derangement, though, can't let him actually realize that, hey, I actually kind of agree with Trump on the actual substance. So instead of paying attention to the substance, what he's doing here is that he's saying, well, Trump said the word vermin, or Trump quoted Hitler, which, by the way, Trump did not quote Hitler. They literally take something that Trump says, a word or a phrase that Trump says, and they say, oh, well, Hitler said that too, right? This little word or phrase, therefore he's quoting Hitler. When quite literally, you can do that with anybody, right? You can take any word or phrase somebody says and see if somebody bad in the past, some evil dictator said it before, and then say, oh, well, you're quoting that person, right? Which that's what they're doing to Trump. And instead of focusing on the substance of what he's saying, they want to focus on that because it's a distraction from the substance, right? It's a distraction from the overall message. And people like Charlamagne the God, who, again, I classify as a confused individual, He falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. But Trump quoted Hitler. Okay, but what does that have to do with the substance of what Trump said? He's not quoting Hitler, first and foremost. That's a distraction. What does that have to do with the actual substance of what he was saying, which was talking about the negative externalities of illegal immigration? Charlamagne the God, you can't get there, right? You can't get there because he's focused on that. And this is a tactic that the mainstream liberal media has been using against people like Vivek. Like, for example, when you talk about so-called replacement theory, when Vivek brought that up, instead of talking about the substance of what he's saying, which is that, hey, Democrats are openly saying demographic change as a result of illegal immigration is good, okay, and they support this, which is the substance of what he's saying. What the mainstream liberal media did, what CNN did, was obsess over the fact that Vivek used the term replacement theory, and then they said, well, it's anti-Semitic, right? Anti-Semitism, bigotry. Okay, but what does that have to do with the substance of what he's saying, the actual argument that's being presented? Doesn't have anything to do with it, and they do that as a distraction. And it works, because you're seeing people like Charlamagne the God show you that it works, okay? This guy knows nothing outside of liberal media talking points, and it shows up time and time and time again when he gets in these type of conversations with people like Vivek or with Piers Morgan or anybody that disagrees with him politically, at least somewhat, but is also smarter than him. Again, it's fascinating stuff.
What did he say? What did he say that quoted Hitler? Let's actually just go to the specifics. Let's just go to the specifics and do this, because this is exactly what happened.
Oh boy!
Pull it up word for word. Read me the whole paragraph. What comes before, during, and after. I don't even know what you're referring to, but I know enough of how the game is played that I just want to play this out.
And he also said that he didn't know Hitler had used the term.
Okay,
and that was the poisoning the blood term. That's straight out of the manifesto.
Just because somebody says a word,
he doesn't even know the name. He doesn't even know Mein Kampf. You don't even know the name. All you know is the manifesto.
That also appears in some English translation of the manifesto is some sort of weird game of gotcha. Just read to me the full paragraph block
you're saying
quote.
Immigrants poison the blood of America.
Give me Donald Trump's quote. We're not going to do the game of the secondhand, NBC News distillation of it. Just get to the primary source.
Hold on.
Because I know Donald Trump, and he's not somebody who goes around quoting Adolf Hitler. It's just not a thing that happens. I know half this country is taught to believe by the media that that's what he does, but that's just not Donald Trump.
I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country. When they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country, Trump told the crowd at a rally in New Hampshire. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. And he kept repeating the phrase, poisoning the blood of our country.
Can you just do me one favor, because we got it? I think this is so valuable. Just read exactly Trump's quote. Read the whole sentence.
Illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation.
Okay, and read the rest of it as you did. Just go the whole paragraph, because I think. Just do it one more time, just so everybody hear what he actually said versus the news story.
The term blood poisoning was used by Hitler.
Read what Donald Trump said, not what somebody wrote about it.
He criticized immigration in the mixing of all races. Trump is doing the exact same thing.
They're poisoning the mental health institutions. They're poisoning the prisons.
Said poisoning the blood of our country.
That was one line from a broader litany.
That's Hitler's line.
And so I'll tell you this, man. I went to the south side of Chicago in this campaign against the advice of my campaign advisors, because they said, why are you going there in the middle of a primary? I'm running to unite the country. You know what they're doing in Chicago right now, or at least at the time I went there? They were converting South Shore High School, a poor high school on the south side of Chicago, into an encampment for migrants who are in this country illegally at a cost of $7,000 per migrant per month.
Oh, absolutely. That happened in New York a couple years ago.
There were things said in the room that I was in that were far more incendiary than what you just read right there. And I don't hold it against the people who were in that room with me, because America First includes all Americans. And I think
Facts. And see, again, that is the point that is going over Charlamagne the God's head, okay? Because he's focused on this little snippet that has been taken out of context by the mainstream liberal media, where, by the way, you can see he actually doesn't know the full context or the full quote that Trump used. He doesn't know, right? So he's trying to find it, and the only thing he can find is liberal media articles on it, because they don't want to tell you exactly what Trump said in the full context of what he said, right? They don't want to tell you that, okay? But the point that Vivek is saying is that, look, there are people in Southside Chicago, black folks, who have said much worse things about illegal immigrants than what Trump said. Then does that make them bigots and Nazi adjacent, right? People who quote Hitler? No, it doesn't. It just makes them people that are concerned about our country and the negative consequences of illegal immigration. So again, the things that Trump are saying are things that people agree with, because again, America first is not just a Trump thing. It's an American thing. People want to put our country first. These are things that unite us. But again, we can't be united because these people want to continue to obsess over Trump and things that Trump says out of context as a way to continue to divide, when the things that he's saying are things that the American people agree with. But that's why they do it, right? They do it that way because they know that the American people agree with it. So instead of talking about Trump and Trump's full context of how illegal immigration is bad and what's happening, no, they take this one thing out of context to smear Trump so that people don't understand what Trump is saying, so that they don't agree with him, right? This is what they do. It's a trick. It's a psyop.
It is dead wrong that we are rewarding mass numbers of people who have entered this country illegally, breaking the law as they do it, coming in by the millions, and rewarding them more than we are our own fellow citizens right here at home.
You'll get no disagreement.
So that's a major problem affecting people, black and white, Democrat and Republican, poor and middle class across this country. And yet we're sitting here obsessing over one word in a long paragraph that said poison the blood when it included a reference to mental health institutions and jails and other public resources in the United States. That is everything that's wrong with our media right now.
When you
and I think that it's going to be people like you guys who are actually going to help lead the media out of this, because you are actually not beholden by the same partisan orthodoxies.
Well, yes, they are. Right? Yes, they are. See, this is where you're wrong, Vivek. This is where you're naive. They are beholden by the same partisan orthodoxies because Charlamagne the God is trying to be a voice in the Democrat Party, right? Charlamagne the God got that interview with Kamala Harris, and when Charlamagne the God fell out of line, Kamala Harris immediately checked him, right? Because she knows that, well, Charlamagne the God, he doesn't have the resume to be interviewing a vice president. The only reason he's interviewing a vice president is because he's a black guy in urban media, and you need to get the Negroes in line, right, to vote Democrat. Okay, that's the only reason why he's getting that interview. Okay, and Kamala showed Charlamagne the same way that Biden showed Charlamagne that, yeah, if you fall out of line, that, yeah, there are consequences, right? We're going to check you. We're going to put you back in your place. So he is beholden to that, because a lot of these people, you know, these bourgeoisie liberals like the Roland Martins of the world, etc., they go along with everything the Democrats want, even if it's bad for so-called black folks or people of color, because they want that access. Okay, they want to be a part of the team. They want to be invited to the parties. So this is what they do. They're pretending like they're holding the Democrat Party accountable, but they never actually do, because they line up and they vote Democrat no matter what. And then they tell their supporters to vote Democrat as well too, because of Democrat talk about, oh, Trump's a threat to democracy. Well, Democrats are overthrowing democracy in their own primary. And they always want to talk about things like voter suppression. Well, again, what is happening in the Democrat Party? They're literally suppressing people from being able to vote in states like Florida and North Carolina. But again, this is the type of stuff that they're okay with it. They're totally cool with it when Democrats do it. But yeah, they want to act like it's the worst thing in the world when the GOP does it, or when Trump does it, right? Even though the GOP is not suppressing any votes. They're not suppressing anybody's votes, right? At all. There's no proof or evidence of that. But there's proof or evidence of Democrats suppressing votes, and there's cricket, silence, right? Again, it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
You got a guy who said,
talk about the actual substance, about what we need to address.
It's hard to when you got a guy who says he wants to be a dictator for a day. It's hard when it's a guy who says you got to terminate the Constitution in order to overturn the results of an election. It's hard when it's a guy who's led an attempted coup in this country.
No, the derangement syndrome. Facts. And focus on the actual problems we have to solve as a country. And you look at actually the border, the economy. You want to look at staying out of foreign wars. Yeah, I will take a president who has sharp elbows, who is actually able to accomplish those things.
So words don't matter?
Over somebody. I'm not saying words don't matter. Yes, words do matter, but words taken out of context in a way. Am I going to say everything the same way that Donald Trump did? I don't know why I'm sitting here being questioned, again, what the entire media loves to do, on picking some word Trump said, and we're sitting here talking about that rather than a vision for the country.
Okay, well, they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about that. They want to take the things that Trump says out of context, blow it up into this big thing, because they don't want to have any real substantive conversations about policies, right? That's why they do it, Vivek. They do it because they don't want to have these real discussions about what's going on in this country, because if they do, then that doesn't fit the narrative. That doesn't help out Democrats, right? you know, this is what they do with the so-called never Trumpers, right? That go on these mainstream liberal media outlets like MSNBC or CNN. They never talk to people like Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger about policies they believe in because they don't give a damn. They don't want to talk about that stuff. They only bring these people on to talk about Trump, right? Because that's the agenda, right? Again, it's super obvious why they do it. Again, they do it with everybody, not just you. They do it literally with everybody.
Let's talk about the actual country. Let's talk about the actual issues we're addressing as a country.
Let's ask about this for the vision of the country.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about the actual country.
What's the point of the GOP attaching themselves to Trump the way they have when he hasn't won anything since 2016?
The GOP attaching themselves to Trump is, I think, a bizarre framing where the GOP is electing a leader to lead our America First movement to the next level, and they're saying in droves that Donald Trump should be that leader.
Facts. Again, it's so funny how these people keep talking about how the GOP is attaching themselves to Trump as if the GOP is forcing people to vote for Trump and to support Trump. No, the GOP has attached themselves to Trump because that's who the people want to lead the party. Okay, the real question is why the Democrats continue to attach themselves to Joe Biden. And I can tell you right now, they are attaching themselves to Joe Biden because they're not even giving the people a chance to vote on whether or not they want Joe Biden to be the leader. Again, something that Charlamagne, in my opinion, since he's so concerned about the so-called threat to democracy, he should be much more concerned about that, right? Which he has been, right? He has been speaking out about it. But again, I think that the Democrat threat to democracy is much bigger than the so-called threat to democracy from, Republicans or for Trump.
Now, how do we actually use that to accomplish something for our country? Our country, I think, made a poor decision in putting Joe Biden in office. I think the results speak for themselves. I think a lot of the economic numbers are a fallacy. Prices are higher. Wages haven't gone up to the same degree. Mortgage rates are higher. People live in tougher circumstances. We've got millions more who have entered this country illegally, taken up public resources that should be used on other purposes. And yet, somehow, we are still focusing on some word that Donald Trump said, as opposed to asking ourselves, how are we going to address that underlying reality?
He hasn't won anything since 2016. So what's the point?
He won in 2016, and
he hasn't won anything since?
What?
2018, you lost the House.
He ran one election.
2018, you lost the House. 2020, you lost the White House.
I think he's going to win in a landslide this year.
But what about... Sure. He hasn't won anything
fairly conducted election. I think he wins in a landslide this year. Look, I think people voted for the policies. And at the end of the day, look, I'm looking to take many of those policies to the next level. That's what I was doing in my candidacy. But the people were clear. They want someone who's tried and true. And they want the policies we had from 2016 to 2020. That's what we're going to have in this country.
Now, Vivek, let me ask you a question.
Yeah. So you seen that, you heard that. Okay. Peanut Brain, Charlamagne the God. Clearly, again, his Trump derangement clouds his ability to think. It clouds his ability to actually engage in substantive conversations, talking about policy or the problems in this country. And again, clips like this is why I react to stuff like this, is because I think Charlamagne the God does represent a subsection of the population that is very confused, right? They can see that the Democrat Party is not good, but they can't actually get themselves to the other side, right? To vote for something different, to support something different because of how deranged they are, particularly when it comes to Trump as a figure, right? And it's extremely sad, okay? Because people like this, in my opinion, are the issue when it comes to voting, right? People like this who, again, you would think just from a logical perspective, they would eventually say, hey, I'm actually going to vote for the other guy. They end up not doing it because they're brainwashed, right? They're brainwashed with this delusion, okay? This psyop that, well, Trump's so bad. He's so terrible. He's the worst thing ever. He's evil. Again, Charlamagne the God thinks that Trump is the Antichrist. And when you actually look at what we believe in, okay, the proposals that are being put forth, there's not that much disagreement. Okay, but regardless of the fact there's not that much disagreement between somebody like Trump and the Charlamagne the God when it comes to immigration, he still thinks that Trump is the worst thing ever. It is really sad that this is what's happening to our country, but this is a result of the psyop, a campaign from the mainstream liberal media to, confuse individuals like Charlamagne the God. He is truly a confused individual, a person, and you see that in these interviews time and time. Again, so let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.